Tonight, the Conservative election betting scandal. We understand more names could come out. Multiple Conservative candidates are facing an investigation from the Gambling Commission over alleged bets on when the general election will be held. We'll have the latest. It's a story that the Sky News YouGov voters panel has reacted to with anger. Hear what they have to say in a moment. And will the story overshadow tonight's latest TV Leaders event? Will be live in the Spin Room in York. It's the latest in our series of Politics Hub leader interviews. Tonight, it's the turn of Green Party co-leader Adrian Ramsey. And it's another night when a lot of the country's attention has been diverted by the football. Can the election fight back against the juggernaut that is the Euros? All that and more with Mick, Lynch, Tim Montgomerie and Sky's election commentator Adam Bolton, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello and welcome to the Politics Hub. Well, tonight we start with breaking news from Germany. In the last few moments, England have drawn 1-1 against Denmark in their Group C match in Frankfurt. England did get off to a good start when a defensive error from Denmark allowed Kyle Walker to steal the ball high up the pitch. The right-back then pulled the ball back into the box and look, Harry Kane slotted it in to put England ahead. But that was, I have to say, as good as it got for England. They weren't able to hold that lead for long. A loose ball from England's captain, Harry Kane, gave Denmark an opening, and then the midfielder brought them level with a stunning long-range strike. England did come close, though, early in the second half, with a strike from Phil Foden that just hit the post. And I have to say, England struggled to gain momentum then in the game. And Gareth Southgate decided to switch things up with a triple substitution. He brought on Ollie Watkins, Jared Bowen and Easy for Kane, Foden and Bukayo Saka. The substitutes brought some energy, with Ollie Watkins coming close, but overall the team did appear to lack energy through the second half. Our sports correspondent Rob Powell is there for us in Frankfurt. Rob, I mean, look, came away with a point, but it was a disappointing day for England fans.
Yeah, it was turning this into a bit of the sports hub. A bit of a disappointing night for the England fans. They were booing in the stadium behind me as the game drifted towards its end. The sense was England were just clinging on. And perhaps the optimistic part first for England fans, it does look like England now have secured enough points to be able to progress into the last 16. They have 4 points. That is usually enough, even as a best third-place team. But the expectation tonight was to be able to seal automatic qualification and clinching top spot. That would have happened with a win. It looked like England were on course for that once Harry Kane struck following the brilliance of Kyle Walker setting up his goal in the 18th minute. But then they didn't use that as a platform to build on, to try to extend the lead, to seize on that advantage. Instead, Denmark managed to equalise. The fact is that bit of sloppiness from Harry Kane himself as the ball was intercepted. The Danes seized possession, and then Morten Hjulmand scored his first ever Denmark goal. Really, perhaps Jordan Pickford saw it too late and it beat him perhaps too easily through the crowded penalty area. But it was 1-1 at half-time. Was there an England response? Not really. There was the tame efforts right at the start of the second half, but then it was all about seemingly the lethargy of the team, and they really didn't demonstrate perhaps that some would think the energy that Gareth Southgate could get from some of these players. You've got Phil Foden, the Premier League Player of the Year, Jude Bellingham, who's just won La Liga and the Champions League with Real Madrid. And then we had the triple change, but it just didn't make the difference.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it, Rob? And look, we always do have these high expectations of England, you know, every year, every international football tournament. But as you say, you know, we've got almost a golden generation of players, Foden, Saka, Bellingham, Kane. Do you think those questions around Gareth Southgate's tactics are going to grow after tonight?
Yeah, I think there's many questions around Gareth Southgate. They came after the first game even. It was a victory, but only 1-0 against Serbia. An expectation it could have been a more convincing victory, but that just led to him defending his players even more, shielding them from criticism. And Kyle Walker was just asked now about this performance overall, and he said you can't expect teams to be steamrolled, even by a side like England, and to sort of set expectations, particularly in a group stage. But it was perhaps some of the lethargy and the inability to sort of demonstrate the energy which will lead to those questions, even if he did make the call with the 3 changes. And we did see Ollie Watkins stretch the Danish defence and try to create some space, but it just wasn't enough. Now they do move on to the final group game against Slovenia on Tuesday. A win would take them through still as group winners, but of course there'll be questions. Can this England side emulate the Lionesses a couple of years ago and becoming European champions? Some would have questions after this performance, but think back to Euro 2016. Portugal weren't that impressive at all in the group stage. They drew all 3 games and they still went on to win the tournament.
You know, that is exactly the kind of attitude I'm going to be channeling. Thank you very much indeed for talking us through that, Rob, there in Frankfurt. I have to say, when I told I was going to start this programme with breaking news about the football, I was quite excited. It wasn't exactly the result or, frankly, the performance that I was hoping to be covering. But as Rob was saying, fingers crossed, build throughout the tournament, maybe things will improve. To the politics now, because if I was going to make a bet on the general election, I wouldn't have put any money on this. The Conservative Party's actual director of campaigning taking a leave of absence of his job over an alleged bet made by his wife on the timing of the election. Oh, and she also happens to be a Conservative candidate. Now, obviously, there's not much more I can say at the minute with an investigation ongoing. But what on earth is happening? You know, just when you think this election campaign couldn't get any more ridiculous, well, it seems to do just that. The Conservative Party Director of Campaigns, Tony Lee, has taken a leave of absence, and it came after it emerged his wife, Laura Saunders, who's the party's candidate in Bristol North West, was being looked into by the Gambling Commission. Now, she's the second Conservative candidate now known to be facing an investigation over allegedly betting on the timing of the election. And Sky News understands more names are set to come out. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, reports.
A Tory attack ad aimed at Labour, but now deleted from social media amid a scandal over Conservatives placing bets on the timing of the general election. Laura Saunders is the second Tory candidate to be investigated over money allegedly being wagered shortly before the Prime Minister called the vote. She's said she'll cooperate with the Gambling Commission inquiry. Her husband, Tony Lee, has also taken a leave of absence from his job as the Conservative Director of Campaigns. For ministers trying to construct a comeback 2 weeks from polling day, it's an extraordinary development.
Well, I'm almost lost for words, I have to say. Obviously, I've got to wait for these investigations. We've all got to wait for these investigations to conclude. But I think you shouldn't be using inside information to try to make a few £100 on the side. That is just not acceptable.
All quiet at Tory HQ, but if anyone was found to have used confidential inside information to make bets, they could be found criminally liable. The Labour leader also campaigning on housing, not hesitating to build a political attack.
This candidate should be suspended, and it's very telling that Rishi Sunak has not already done that. If it was one of my candidates, they'd be gone and their feet would not have touched the floor.
2 weeks from polling day, this betting scandal is another unwelcome development. Yes, it distracts from what the Tories want to talk about, but it also hones in on existing attack lines waged against the Tories of greed, sleaze and cronyism.
And it's not just those from the party being looked at. One of Rishi Sunak's close protection officers has also been arrested and suspended for alleged improper election gambling. Data from the website Betfair shows a spike in bets being placed on a July election, with thousands of pounds being wagered a day before Rishi Sunak announced the vote. This academic, who has studied political gambling, says lots of factors can lead to an increase in betting activity.
Some people will be working on inside information. They might be getting it from the kind of vibes that they receive in conversation with other kind of political activists or with politicians, but also people study polls really extensively. But what counts as inside information is quite a murky field.
What's an example of something that might go wrong?
The Prime Minister now has his answer. With 14 days until polls open, this is another setback Rishi Sunak can ill afford. Rob Powell, Sky News in West London.
Well, the Conservatives will certainly be hoping for a change in momentum this evening because tonight 4 leaders, Rishi Sunak, Sir Keir Starmer, Sir Ed Davey and John Swinney, are all in York for a special edition of the BBC's Question Time that will air later on tonight. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is there in the spin room. John, you've been in a few spin rooms, haven't you? How's the atmosphere where you are now?
Well, I have to say, for the last hour or so, people have been more interested in the England-Denmark game. But it's livening up now because the politicians are starting to arrive. That's the politicians who are going to be here in the spin room, both during and after the programme. Now, the format, Sophie, it's 2 hours, and each of the 4 leaders who are going to be here get half an hour each being quizzed by a studio audience. So in order, it's Sir Ed Davey first, then John Swinney of the SNP, then Sir Keir Starmer, and then Rishi Sunak. He's going last, and we are expecting the betting scandal to dominate the questions here, because we've already heard from Sir Keir Starmer today. He's saying that if Laura Saunders was a Labour candidate, her feet wouldn't have touched the ground. She should be suspended. We've heard other opposition party leaders go on the attack. Now, what is interesting about what's happened here in York today, Sir Keir Starmer was up campaigning in Fulford, a York suburb, talking about housing. That's what normally happens when party leaders come and do these events. They campaign close to the event so that they can do their then do their preparation. But Rishi Sunak, no sign, in hiding. So we believe that he flew up to Leeds Bradford Airport earlier in the afternoon, but we haven't seen him since. So he obviously will be on the defensive over the betting scandal. Last week at the Sky News event, we saw just how rather crestfallen Mr. Sunak looked after his confidence, his morale seems to have been badly damaged by the D-Day fiasco, his snub to Normandy veterans. But at the same time, in the first televised debate, when he actually debated with Sir Keir Starmer, he came out fighting and really took the attack to Sir Keir Starmer, who was a little bit sluggish to respond to all the attacks from Mr. Sunak. Now, I am about to talk to somebody who will no doubt dispute what I've just said, because I am joined by Jonathan Ashworth, Labour's chief attack dog, the shadow paymaster general. What are you expecting here tonight?
Well, I think, again, we will see Keir Starmer outline a plan for the future of the country, how after 14 years of failure on decline, we need to turn that page. You'll see him talking about the NHS. You'll see him talking about our plan to cut energy bills for good, about how we'll deliver economic stability. And I tell you what you won't get. You won't get Keir Starmer saying he's just been down the bookies, placing bets on when the election date will be. But I think there are serious questions for Rishi Sunak tonight. He has to come clean and tell us who knew about this election date. Has he asked his staff, his MPs, his cabinet ministers, whether any of them placed bets? It's insider trading. It's a scandal. And just like the COVID PPE contracts, just like the partying in Downing Street when we were in lockdown, it tells you everything you need to know about the Tories. It's another grubby scandal, and the Tories think it's one rule for them and another for the rest of us.
I'm told by a source in the gambling industry that they're expecting more names. So we already know about Craig Williams, Conservative candidate, PPS. We know about the police officer. Now, he's being investigated by the police. The 2 Tory candidates are not yet. It's just the Gambling Commission. We know now about Laura Saunders, I beg your pardon. Obviously, Sir Keir will go on the attack on that. Is he going to be ready for what is bound to be the inevitable tax onslaught from Mr. Sunak, the £2,000 Labour tax grab, all the other tax allegations that the Conservatives have been making against Sir Keir? He's not been terribly specific in ruling out or rebutting some of the Tory tax charges. Why doesn't he fight fire with fire, if you like, rather than just saying, oh, we've no plans to do that?
Well, just quickly on the Tory gambling scandal, the police officer has been suspended, but Rishi Sunak has lacked a backbone. He's too weak to suspend 2 Tory candidates. He should do that, and he should tell us whether any of his cabinet ministers, and any of his top aides also place bets. This is a scandal. On the broader issue of tax and spend, let me be clear. Labour will not increase income tax, VAT or national insurance. All of our commitments are fully funded. The Tory manifesto is a long wish list of unfunded commitments, and it will mean mortgages going up again. They'll make the same mistakes Liz Truss made.
Right, Jonathan Ashworth, thank you very much indeed. Well, a few moments ago, I spoke to Kevin Hollingray, the business minister, and I began by asking him about those betting allegations. Kevin Hollingray, did you have a bet on the date of the election?
No, I didn't. And I'm really appalled to hear what's gone on in terms of other people doing that. But no, it's obviously completely inappropriate and needs to be investigated, of course, an independent investigation. But no, I didn't, John.
Do you think the candidate should be suspended, as opposition politicians are saying?
Well, I think an investigation should take place, and I think that's the right way to do it. We don't know the facts of the case yet, but let's see the outcome of that.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? She is the wife of your campaign's director, and now he's taken leave of absence. What was your reaction when you heard all that?
Well, you probably know more detail than I do, John, but I said due process should be followed, an investigation should take place, whatever the outcome of that is, we should, of course, abide by, but these allegations are really serious and they're really not helpful.
So that was a pretty tough response to the gambling allegations from a Conservative minister there. He also talked about the tax arguments between Labour and the Conservatives. He is expecting the PM to come out fighting on tax, as he did in the first TV debate, when he left Sir Keir Starmer looking pretty flat-footed. Obviously, the format here is going to be that they don't get to debate with each other this time. Mr. Sunak obviously likes to debate with Sir Keir because he believes he can come out fighting perhaps in the way that he does at Prime Minister's questions. But we did see last week that at the Sky News event, the audience can be pretty unforgiving at times. So it may well be we'll see a bit more of that. And all the party leaders, let's not forget, it's not just Mr. Sunak and Sir Keir tonight. It's also Sir Ed Davey from the Liberal Democrats. Might we get some questions about the Horizon scandal, because he's bruised by that, his critics would say. And then John Swinney of the SNP. We've not seen a huge amount of him during this campaign in England because, of course, it's been Stephen Flynn who's been appearing at the TV debates so far. So Mr. Swinney will be here to talk about, obviously, the SNP's independence plans and various other proposals they've put in their manifesto. They will obviously be challenged on their record in Scotland, and of course all the problems that the SNP's had with Nicola Sturgeon quitting, and then Mr. Humza Yousaf's going quickly as well after a very short time. Let me just clarify one thing, Sophie. I said earlier Mr. Sunak flew here to Leeds Bradford Airport. I am told that is not correct. He got the train.
There you go. John Craig, thank you very much indeed. John Craig in the spin room. Basically, John's second home, it feels like, during the election campaign. We'll have lots more from John as the evening progresses and the build-up continues. Now, the latest polling shows Labour on course for a landslide victory when voters go to the polls, with a new YouGov projection suggesting they could be on course for a 200-seat majority. Well, Sky's Laura Bundock's been speaking to our voters panel to try and gauge their views on the current state of the campaign, including, of course, the revelations of that betting probe.
As the alleged insider gambling scandal deepens, the Sky News YouGov voters panel reacted. Their verdict, damning.
I'm absolutely disgusted. It's made me not want to vote for Rishi Sunak and dislike him even more because there's no morals there.
This is the final straw. I think this is it's over. It's unattainable now, and Rishi Sunak should step down, and the Conservative Party has to start all over again.
For dyed-in-the-wool Tories, it probably won't make a lot of difference, but I think for people who might be wavering, it might sway them towards Labour or, worst-case scenario, reform.
Even without the betting probe, the polls weren't looking positive for the Tories. These are the 2019 constituencies our voters panel represent. And this is what the latest Sky News YouGov poll predicts will happen. It suggests 22 of the 40 seats could change hands, the majority flipping from Conservative to Labour. Voters in these seats aren't surprised.
Most people in the area are expressing a change from Conservative because they've made such a mess of things.
I am surprised at the how radical it is and how it's predicted they're going to take so many seats from the Conservatives.
This makes me inclined to even more vote for reform for the opposition to the Labour, because I really don't want Labour to get in.
The poll also predicts Tory losses to the Lib Dems.
I think just with the way that the national sentiment is, I think that people here are likely and inclined to vote Lib Dem rather than Conservative. I'm still undecided personally, and I'm still waiting to really make my mind up.
Even in true blue seats staying Conservative, some of our panel unimpressed and undecided.
I think the options really do range from completely incompetent through to downright deluded. And so I still haven't made up my mind. And to be honest, I really would like a none of the above option.
Polls can predict, but it's people who decide. And that day's still 2 weeks away. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Well, I'm joined now by our panel for this evening. Got a bit of an echo going on. I'm hoping it's just going to disappear soon, hopefully. I'm going to keep going, and hopefully it's going to go. So we're joined it's all completely fine. This is classic gremlins of live TV. The General Secretary of the RMT Union, Mick Lynch, the Conservative commentator, Tim Montgomerie, and our Sky election commentator, Alan Bolton, who knows a few things about technical issues in TV studios, I'm sure.
Indeed, yeah. But we can hear you twice, so it's great.
We're going to go to a break, hopefully get it sorted, and we'll see you in a few moments' time. Thank you.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky's West of England correspondent.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. We help you to understand the world with us.
I'm Adam Parsons, I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world.
I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. The reason I do this job is because you never know where it's going to lead.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. Well, I'm joined now by a panel for this evening. The General Secretary of the RMT Union, Mick Lynch, the Conservative commentator, Tim Montgomerie, and we also have here Sky's election commentator, Adam Bolton. Adam, what do you make of this betting scandal?
Well, I was just listening to the panel there, and I think they pretty much got it right. I mean, what you wonder about this is, first of all, how people in number 10 could have felt so entitled to break what is a basic rule of not really betting on politics, which you're involved with, just like footballers don't bet on games. Secondly, how stupid they have to be to have done it in the way that they've done. And none of that breeds confidence really in the campaign, given that it's the campaign manager who appears to be involved in all this. And you know, sort of Lady Bracknell's rules of, you know, one mistake is OK, but I mean, the number of mistakes that have been throughout this campaign are really careless, and does appear, from what we were hearing from your panel, that it cut through to the voters. I mean, it's important to remember that when things started going wrong for the Conservatives in the opinion polls was Boris Johnson and Partygate. And whatever people think about it, that was an ethics sleaze issue. So this is bad news, I think.
It cuts through, doesn't it? It really does. And yeah, as Adam was saying, you know, the voters are picking it up. It has got that kind of cut through as well. It's also, I feel like it's just extraordinary. Like, I can't actually believe it's sort of happening. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's like the thick of it. It's like an episode of that. The thing's going to ever decrease in circles. And integrity is what Labour have been pushing out. Keir Starmer, as well as the stuff about a fairly bland presentation of manifesto, is every day saying that I'm a serious guy. Rachel Reeves is exactly the same. We're really serious people. And then the Tories have descended into this, which most people will find incredible. And integrity is going to be the word that they have to put out there, I suppose. And you can't trust people who can't be left on their own with a betting app and think that the betting companies will not find out, because these are really sophisticated organisations and they find patterns. So if there's more of this, we may get a concession of election before a vote is put into a ballot box, I think.
And like you say, like John Craig says, he's been told by industry sources that it's going to keep coming.
Well, those betting companies will know. They'll find these bets if they need to.
And I'll be honest, it doesn't look like it's been the most sophisticated way of hiding where the bets came from either. And Tim, how damaging is this for the Conservative Party? We obviously heard there from Kevin Holland-Rake saying, look, it's appalling, it needs looking into. Is that response enough?
Well, I want to know where the Prime Minister is. I know he's about to do the question time debate, but I've had my phone ringing off the hook today with Tory activists who are angry, bewildered, upset. Robert Halfon, the former Conservative MP for Harlow, was telling me last night in Harlow, Tory activists were having to stuff envelopes till midnight last night to get leaflets out. And, you know, they're activists in the Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, Greens, who do the same. They do it because they believe in their community, they believe in their values. You don't have to agree with them, but they don't make any money out of their involvement in politics. They're in it for the right reasons. And they see people at the centre who their contributions to the party pay the wages of, acting like spivs, stupid, venal spivs.
You seem quite angry.
Oh, I'm really angry about it. And what I want the Prime Minister to do is get out there and embody this anger. I see a Prime Minister who comes on programmes like yours, Sophie, and is controlled, almost programmed, like from central casting, and he's always, like, very measured. That's fine most of the time. You don't want a Prime Minister who loses control. But sometimes, when you're having a scandal, exactly what Mick's just described, you want the Prime Minister, you want your leaders to go out there and, you know, thump the table and be as angry and as concerned about it as you, because this affects all of us. All of us are in politics who believe politics is a noble thing, are being dragged through the mud by scandals like this. And I want the Prime Minister, he's obviously got the question time thing tonight, to just show a little bit of that.
And the truth is, he's left an open goal for Keir Starmer, because all day Keir Starmer has been demanding the suspension of these people. If he announces it tonight in question time, it's going to look like too little, too late, and that he's responding to Keir Starmer, which is all not good.
I saw you nodding along to what Tim was saying.
Well, it's not good in politics. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Tories, as you know, and for me... Inside,
you're surprising me there.
And inside, a Tory collapse suits my agenda. But you do get the public saying they're all the same. Well, some of these politicians will prove they're not the same. They've got some integrity. And the same as you, Tim. I know lots of people who are out campaigning for Labour and others who do it because they want something for the country. And if people are just dipping their hands in our pockets while they're scheming to either lose the election or not caring about the future of the country, it's not a good thing for the political debate that we need to have.
Adam, while I've got you, I'm keen to get your perspective on the kind of extraordinary set of, they call them MRP polls, right? We're kind of a super polls which then projects who's going to win, what seats, etc. And there's been there's been a huge spread of numbers, right? So it's very difficult to know which one is accurate and which one isn't. And some of them are really extraordinary in what they're saying. I mean, do you believe the projections?
Well, I believe that serious people have been carrying out these polls and that they have tried to, focus what they're doing. But of course, in the end, it comes down to the assessment they have of individual constituencies. And we've got very wide variations. I mean, the Sky poll, which was kind of in the middle, was the only one which, for example, showed Reform getting any seats.
Yeah.
And likewise, we had a majority, I think, going from 165 to over 300. Now, they can't all be right? I mean, what they are is consistent with the broader polls, which just show, that the Conservatives are 20 points ahead. It's when you get into the interpretation of that you get these wide variations. And, my feeling about this is it all hangs on the argument that former Conservative voters in 2019, are so angry with the Conservatives that they are turning to other parties at such a rate that it actually means the more Conservatives you had in your Conservative voters you had in the Conservatives constituency last time, the worse the swing against the Conservatives is this time. Now, that has happened sometimes. Some people say that happened in their analysis of the local elections, for example, but it doesn't happen very often in elections, so we'll find out.
You won't get the convergence. You normally get a narrowing, as they say, even if there's a clear majority. They come together a bit. But it may be that they're flanging apart, that Labour will continue to go out and Tories will continue to dip.
And I'm interested in your take on this, because obviously, as you said, you've not found the Conservative Party. But do you worry that if there isn't much, opposition to Keir Starmer, if he does end up getting a supermajority, then there's no one kind of holding him to account? Or do you
I'm worried that he won't do enough.
He
won't do enough socialism, is what I'm looking for. He'll be very comfortable that he's not worried about the backbench, because there are so many Labour MPs that he can rely on a majority forever. So I was hoping he'd be a bit bolder on his policies, and if he's got a massive majority, he may not be as bold as some of us on the left would want.
Because actually, if he has a smaller majority, he's relying on the left wing.
He's got to look at some of the people that he doesn't like. But that's
so we're united in not wanting such a big majority.
No,
I mean, the drama may actually be in the smaller parties. That if the Conservative Party, if the Labour Party does so well, then we might see, for example, both the Liberal Democrats and possibly even the Green Party in the country looking like an opposition, and that may possibly tempt people to move towards the Liberal Democrats from the left of the Conservative Party, or possibly the left wing of the Labour Party to be tempted to move towards the Greens, because we know that has already happened with, for example, the Deputy Chair of Momentum has gone to the Greens. The Jenny Formby, the former General Secretary from Unite the Union, has come out and said she's voting Green. So what we might see is the Greens coming up as a left-wing party.
Tim, look, we often speak quite a lot on the programme. You come on a lot, which is lovely. We haven't seen you for a couple of weeks. How are you feeling now? Because it does feel, as Mick was saying, it's going the wrong way.
Can I have a hug? It's tough, people don't have much sympathy with people in politics, but last week I spoke to Conservative candidates, their staff, their secretaries, their researchers, and suddenly they're facing redundancy. They did not expect in certain seats to be in this trouble, and their lives are about to be upended. And I know people don't have much sympathy for people in politics, but it's a brutal business. And I tell you one thing, I support the first past the post system. I think it brings us strong government. But when the electorate moves, which they're about to do at this election, it sweeps away everything in its path. And we are just going to see, the Liberal Democrats may get more MPs this time than they would under proportional representation through first past the post. When the herd moves, to quote a former Prime Minister, the herd really moves. And in this first past the post system, it's going to be one hell of an election night because the Tories are going to... we are probably about to see history unfold before us, and not in a way that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, it's going to be an extraordinary time, I'm sure. Thank you very much indeed. A really interesting discussion. Thank you, Adam, as always. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. From eye-catching spending plans to how to deal with drug users, I sit down with the co-leader of the Greens, Adrian Ramsey, for the second in our series of leaders' interviews. And as all eyes turn to the Euros, we're going to ask whether the football is making it harder for politicians to cut through. We should be celebrating like that tonight, I have to say. Hello, welcome back. Now we have got the second in our series of leaders' interviews with the major parties. Last night was Sir Ed Davey, this guy here, so do check that out on the website if you missed it. But tonight, it is the turn of the Green Party and their co-leader, Adrian Ramsey.
Climate, climate, climate. Yet again, centre stage of the Green Party's vision for the country. For 14 years, it's been the Caroline Lucas story, but the only ever Green MP is now stepping down. The party reckons, though, that this could be their breakthrough year. They have chances in 4 target seats. A manifesto built around big spending, big taxation and big borrowing. But is it a serious plan or a pipe dream? And can they persuade voters they're more than a bunch of eco-fanatics? Well, Adrian Ramsey is the party's co-leader in England and Wales.
Hi, Sophie, good to see you.
On a gloriously sunny afternoon,
we went for a stroll. How long is it that you've been co-leader for then?
2.5 years now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So how's the campaign been?
Oh, I'm really pleased with how it's going. We're getting a fantastic response, and there's a real sense that people want to change, but they're not really convinced by Labour. I think people are looking for more of a diversity of voices in Parliament.
It's interesting because you haven't really cut through in terms of parliamentary seats other than in Brighton. Do you think that could change this time then?
Absolutely, and the polls suggest that it's going to, that there's multiple seats where we've got a fantastic chance, 4 in particular, where we think we've got a great chance of winning, and others where we've got a really strong base of support on the ground.
How do you keep going on the campaign trail? Are you like a kind of caffeine addict? Are you like, swallowing Haribo every 5 minutes? What's your vibe?
I'm trying to maintain a reasonably sort of stable level of energy rather than the peaks and troughs, which are
so noisy. There you go. Thank you so much for being on the programme. First things first, what is the story you're telling people this election? Why should people vote Green?
The Green Party is the only party that's being honest in this election in saying we need to put the investment in that's needed to restore our public services, to tackle the cost of living crisis, to transition to a green economy, and that if we do that, we can bring about real hope and real change for people. And yes, Labour's on track to get a big majority in the next Parliament. But if Keir Starmer has such a huge majority that he can continue to make U-turns as he already has been on climate, on funding for public services, then he won't have anyone to hold him to account. If we have a strong group of Green MPs in there, if people vote with their hearts, we can push Labour to be bolder on the big issues of our time, whether that's on climate or whether that's on funding for the NHS.
That's interesting. So Green MPs in Parliament, you see it, would be pushing Keir Starmer to effectively spend a bit more money on public services, it feels like. I just want to start by talking about the sheer scale of the new spending that you're calling for. £900 billion across 5 years. I mean, that is such a big number. I can hardly get my head around it. It's about 15 times the annual schools budget. I mean, that's not remotely serious, is it?
Sophie, we're the only party that's being honest in this election about the investment that's needed to tackle the scale of the challenges in our public services and the cost of living
investment,
crisis.
But that's not a serious amount of money.
Let's look at what we are proposing compared to other countries in Europe, because the UK is near the bottom of the European league table at the moment in terms of the proportion of GDP that goes into raising money from taxes. And the Green Party is saying that we should ask those with the broadest shoulders to pay modestly more.
It's
actually Labour and the Conservatives who are way out of step with what other countries are doing, and they're not being honest with people. Can I just say that the Institute for Fiscal Studies has said that the next government will either need to cut public services or increase taxes. There's a conspiracy of silence between Labour and the Conservatives here, whereas the Green Party is being honest about the action needed.
You're being honest about raising taxes, that's right. But I just am not sure if you're being honest saying that it's just those with the broadest shoulders who will be made to pay those taxes. Dan Needle, tax analyst, saying, a graduate earning £60,000 with 3 children will be paying a 72% marginal rate of tax under your plans. People earning over £50,000 would be paying more tax. I mean, these are not, the poorest, I get that, but at the same time, it's not just those with the broadest shoulders, is it? It's people with quite ordinary shoulders as well.
Our proposal is that the national insurance is changed so that everybody pays the same percentage of their salary on national insurance, regardless of what they earn. At the moment, people earning under 50,000 pay a lower percentage of their salary on national insurance than people over 50,000. I'm not saying 50,000 is a high salary. Someone earning 55,000 on our proposals would pay £5 extra a week. But let's look at what they'd get for that, because at the moment we have a situation where people are forking out for a private dentist because there's no access to NHS dentists. They're paying exorbitant rail fares. They're paying high energy and food bills. Green proposals are about tackling the cost of living crisis and the causes of why people are having to fork out those things. We'd all be better off overall if we put the investment in.
I absolutely accept, the need for investment in public services. You outlined some of your tax measures. You also would be borrowing, though, wouldn't you? You say that you could borrow more than £325 billion to fund your spending. So that's about the amount we borrowed during COVID. Our national debt is already more than our entire GDP. I mean, how much extra interest on our debt would we be paying under your proposals?
So our proposal is that over the course of the Parliament, the extra spending that we would have on day-to-day spending would be funded by increased day-to-day taxes. What we're proposing is that by the end of the Parliament, the only money that's being borrowed
How much extra debt interest will we be
money
paying?
that's being borrowed for investment in things like our school buildings,
You're
and
answering a different
hospital
question.
buildings, and also things like the money we need to put into insulating people's homes, which will bring bills down and keep people's homes warm, invest in our public transport. The reason why I'm setting out this picture to you, Sophie, is that these measures are about reinvigorating our economy. They have all sorts of financial benefits in getting more people into work with the taxes they then pay back into the system and addressing some of the underlying problems we have in our economy. The debt to GDP ratio we'd have at the end would still be lower than many other European countries, way lower than where it's been in the UK, certainly in the decades after the Second World War.
Your manifesto says Greens will not allow our country to be held back by fiscal rules. Choosing to trap us all in a self-imposed fiscal straitjacket is a false economy. I mean, what did you let Liz Truss write that bit?
Well, Liz Truss borrowed to give tax breaks to the very richest in society. We're talking about investing in a future that will be better for everybody. And we need to bring about those changes because we have high levels of inequality. We have changes in the climate that are running away with themselves. And the climate experts are always very clear. The costs of not acting on the climate emergency are far greater than the costs of acting.
Let's talk about the climate emergency then, as you put it, and some of the green issues in your manifesto. You're opposed to nuclear power. I guess my question is, it's greener than using fossil fuels, isn't it? Nuclear power doesn't produce carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases. Should you not be accepting that it is part of our energy future?
So if we're talking about new nuclear power stations, there's a very practical question here in terms of energy security and in terms of carbon reduction. And that's where do we best put the investment to have an impact quickly in reducing energy bills and in improving our energy security. New nuclear power stations, as we've seen with the huge delays at Hinkley Point, take decades to start producing any energy at all.
Would you continue with Hinkley Point, by the way?
So, we wouldn't commission any new proposals for nuclear. So somewhere like Sizewell, for example, that is not up and running yet, the new Sizewell one, we would not continue with. Of course, the existing nuclear power stations have a role to play in the transition that we need to bring about. But in terms of where we put new investment, we can have a far bigger impact far more quickly in tackling the crisis of energy bills and of carbon emissions if we put that money into renewable energy and into reducing energy use, things like home insulation, that if we do it nationwide, help everybody to benefit from it, we can reduce bills and keep people's homes warm.
I mean, another way of doing that would be to encourage people to drive less, to use their cars less. Your last manifesto called HS2 doomed and damaging, but obviously train travel is greener than car travel. What is your position on HS2 now? Because I couldn't see it in your manifesto at all.
Well, the HS2 leg from London to Birmingham is well underway in terms of the construction, so that's clearly happening. The question is, now the government has abandoned the bit of HS2 that the north of England was perhaps particularly looking for, how do we ensure that that money is used to get better rail connectivity for the north of England and the Midlands for our regions? And so we want to see much stronger investment in regional transport infrastructure, including new train routes, absolutely, but also the investment that can bring down the price of rail, which is still exorbitantly high in the UK.
I wonder, do they link into the same thing? You're a bit puritanical when it comes to green issues. You're making perfect the enemy of the good. Nuclear power isn't perfect, HS2 isn't perfect, so we're not going to do those things. But maybe it's better than nothing.
Sophie, I think I've given you a very pragmatic answer on both of those questions. On nuclear, it's not an ideological question. It's a question of what investment is going to have the impact most quickly in bringing down carbon emissions and energy bills.
We, of course, saw this week the Just Stop Oil activists painting Stonehenge with orange powder this week. Is that something that you support?
No, I don't support that particular tactic. What I would say is that I do defend the right to peaceful protest, because you only have to look at what's happened in countries where those rights to protest are clamped down on, that you're not really living in a democracy. But what I would say is Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil are different organisations from the Green Party. We're about trying to achieve change through the political process, through representing residents in Westminster and in councils around the country. And so, I'm not here to speak for other organisations that will make their own decisions, and I don't always agree with their individual tactics.
There's one other thing that I did want to ask you about. A recent health policy paper on your website condemned caesareans said that medical intervention in birth should be limited. Now, I know that since you've said it's not your policy, it's been removed, it hasn't made it into the manifesto. Yeah. But, you know, I'll be honest, I read that, and, you know, bearing in mind we've had these maternity scandals, we've seen hundreds of mums and babies dying because of these kind of attitudes. It's kind of upsetting. How did that happen?
Yeah, I can understand the upset on that, Sophie. That policy is not in our manifesto. There's no way I would have approved of it being in our manifesto for this election. Someone found a link to an old statement that had been dug up from somewhere, but it doesn't reflect what the Green Party is putting forward at this election.
I guess it's like, you know, the professionalisation of your party, that stuff like this can end up on your website. And I have to say as well, you know, your deputy leader, Zach Polanski, you know, once a hypnotherapist who said he could increase women's breast size through hypnosis. I mean, it sounds quite misogynistic, if I'm being honest.
Well, my understanding is that Zach has apologised for whatever role he had in that in the past. I don't know the details of that, to be honest.
Yeah, so you didn't realise it until it came out in the media, is that what you're saying? Or?
Well, I heard about it when it came out in the media a while back, but he's been clear that's not something that he in any way stands by or condones.
Have you spoken to him about it at all? Or?
Not recently, no.
One last thing in the manifesto. You want to decriminalise the personal possession of drugs. What does that mean? Does that mean any drug that you're in possession of wouldn't become a criminal offence?
The Green Party's focus in relation to drug addiction is that drug addiction should be treated as a medical issue rather than a criminal issue. So if people are addicted to drugs, they need to have support for how to get off those drugs and to get away from the power that the drug dealers, the criminal masterminds behind drugs can often bring about. And if you regulate the drug system, take it out of the hands of the big criminal gangs, then you can protect people who have become addicted to drugs or who may be suffering from having taken drugs which are not what they think they were.
What's your own feeling? Because I mean, a lot of people will be listening saying, yeah, look, the drugs policy isn't working, it's absolutely right.
Well, I think there is a case, particularly in relation to those drugs that are often called not hardcore drugs, that the amount of police time that goes into trying to prosecute people for possession is disproportionate to the impact, when actually the focus should be on taking the power out of the criminal gangs by regulating the drug.
Have you taken drugs?
I've never taken illegal drugs. It's just not something I've personally ever been interested in.
Okay, and thank you so much for the interview. I just want to end with a little quickfire, if that's okay. I know, I love a quickfire. You haven't taken drugs, but what is the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
Oh, that's a hard example, Sophie. I mean, people often ask, you know, how green am I in my own life? Yeah. I do my best, but some things are easier than others, aren't they? So I do own a car. It's a hybrid car. I would have got an electric car, but there was no electric vehicle charging points near me in the place where I lived when I first got it. I'd probably come up with a better example with a bit more notice.
That's fair enough. Labour or Conservative?
Well, the polls are very clear that we're heading for a Labour government with a big majority. If we have a group of Green MPs in the next Parliament, we can push that government to be bolder.
If you could pick any cabinet job, what would you go for?
Well, I think I would say Chancellor of the Exchequer, because it's the finances that we've been talking about today that are critical for bringing about the changes that we need in society, whether that's funding our public services or whether that's the transition to a green economy.
And finally, who's going to win the Euros?
Oh, well, I started off saying that I was going to try and watch all the England and Scotland matches, but with the busyness of the election, I've only managed to watch one match so far, which was the Scotland one, which is, as I'm supporting both teams, not a great result.
Yeah, not one to pick.
I've got fingers crossed for both.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, there we have it, the second of our leaders' interviews with the Green Party co-leader, Adrian Ramsey. Well, last night it was Scotland in action in the Euros. Tonight it was England, and it does raise a question. Is the football making it harder for politicians to punch through? The TV schedules are filled up with football games that can't be moved, and of course, it could also make life a bit harder for MPs out door knocking and canvassing. I mean, who wants to be the one who interrupts someone and potentially making them miss a goal? It's not going to make life any easier, and possibly not making politicians any more popular either. Well, our Deputy Secretary Sam Coates is in the Spin in New York ahead of tonight's debate. Sam, knowing you as I do, I'm sure you're someone who finds it very difficult to ever be distracted from a football game.
That's right, welcome to the Spin Room at York University, where even here, Sophie, the BBC had to turn off the BBC's coverage of tonight's England football game in order to keep us hacks concentrated on what they say is the big clash of the evening. Look, they're competing against the Euros. They're going to have to compete against Wimbledon. Very soon they're going to have to compete against Glastonbury. This isn't about Keir Starmer versus Rishi Sunak. It's about any of them getting any attention of the voters. But whatever happens, the vibe isn't going to change. I have to say, one side feels that they could have done better. People are disappointed in them. The manager is looking crestfallen, and somebody's got to lose soon. As in football, as in politics, it's all the same.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor. Right, Mick, Tim and Adam are with us again. Adam, does the football make any difference, do you think?
No.
Well, that's it. Scrap this whole end of the show. Thank you very much.
Harold Wilson, they said.
I mean, there's a myth about 1966, but I actually think the England victory came after the election. So it didn't have any impact there. There's also talk about 1970, when Harold Wilson apparently did gamble on doing extremely well in I think it was Mexico.
You have to be careful about using the word gamble at the moment.
On England doing very well in Mexico, and they put in a very disappointing performance, and the goalie dived over the ball and various other things, and so that didn't go particularly well. Had this been timed so that England won the World Cup or the Euros.
Get the right tournament.
Euros, the week before polling day, then it might have had an impact. But other than that, I don't think it have any impact at all.
Are you guys into the Euros yourselves?
Well, I'm a big football fan. I watch it all the time, and it is annoying if canvassers come and knock on your door. So you need a good agent. The election agent needs to know all the fixtures and all the soap operas and everything that may annoy people. Yeah. Before you rap on anyone's door.
Tim Farron, the former Liberal Democrat leader, though, who was saying tonight was so dire in the England second-half performance, he thought, actually, if he went and knocked on doors and gave people a break from the football, he might have actually been doing people...
Yeah, to be honest, it's true, actually.
It was pretty rubbish, yeah.
I did notice, I think it was a speech you did last year where you said that you support England depending on how pompous the press is, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the press has been really bad about England performances. I support the Republic of Ireland and we're not playing, but I do support England and Scotland. But sometimes it can be difficult to follow England if you're not fully committed when we're going to win it, as if nobody else has got the right to. And the history tells us that England don't win it very often, or anything very often. But I wish them success in this tournament.
I feel like that kind of self-belief right now is probably, not something you have to worry about too much.
Well, they're going to build up to the...
I mean, I think I don't, as you can tell, I don't follow this very closely, but England will qualify for the knockout before the election or not, won't they?
Yeah.
And I think if they don't qualify, the gloom will increase.
Yeah, well, there you go. Leaving you on that very gloomy note. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being with us. Lovely to have the conversations with you guys tonight. We will see you tomorrow. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah.